Alors bonjour, ça me fait plaisir d'être parmi vous ce matin. I'll speak English, I guess. I'm a little out of practice though now living in Paris since August when I became the Dean of the American Cathedral there. It's truly a joy to be with you this morning. And I bring you greetings from our Bishop, Mark Eddington, and all the members of our small but mighty 20-some congregations spread out across Europe, France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, Belgium, as you would expect, Amsterdam, and even Tbilisi, Georgia. Did you know we have Episcopalians in Tbilisi, Georgia? Here's a beautiful thing. They don't speak a lick of English, and they're there because they needed a church that would welcome all of them and asked to be part of us. Isn't that beautiful? So the American Cathedral in Paris is the oldest Episcopal church outside of the United States. It was founded in 1859, as Dean Patrick said, by expat Americans. If you were to walk in today, you would find a mix of people from all over the world. We describe ourselves as a multicultural, bilingual congregation. Sunday morning is primarily in English, with some French mixed in, but other services are primarily in French. So if you're ever in Paris, come join us. Heck, join us online sometime. When you're up at 5 in the morning needing to worship on a Sunday, you can come join us in Paris. It's a joy to be here this morning. I was telling Dean Patrick that the last time I was here was when my youth group from St. John's Cathedral in Denver, a lot of years ago, slept in the gym here, came here and slept in the gym many years ago. It was a lot of fun. So, glad to be with you. Next question. Are there any veterans here today? Any veterans? A few. So thank you all for your service. And if you're online, you can put in the chat that you're a veteran. Thank you all. This is one of the things some people don't know about me. I'm a veteran. I served in the United States Navy as a chaplain, both as a reservist and on active duty for some years after when I was ordained a priest and moved to Colorado Springs. Logic would dictate that I become a Navy chaplain when I moved to Colorado Springs, right? God does these things sometimes. But I became a Navy chaplain when I realized that these folks, all these incredibly strong, committed folks serving in the military, didn't necessarily agree with all of the foreign policy of the United States, but they had a sense of a call to serve. And someone needed to be there to communicate and share with them and the love of God, and I could, and I did, and it was an incredible gift to do so. So one of the things you learn when you serve in the military, even as a chaplain, is this whole idea of readiness. Readiness is fundamental to serving in the military. When I was a reservist, and any of you who were reservists would know this, you always kept in the corner of a room a green duffel bag with everything you needed to leave basically the next day. We always made sure that we had all of those unpleasant documents no one wants to deal with up to date and ready to go, wills and powers of attorney and all those things, always ready to go because we never knew what was going to be asked of us. Now, even if you haven't served in the military, if you are a follower of Jesus, if you are with us here on this way of love to which God has brought us together, then this idea of readiness actually matters to us, maybe in a different way. And this time of year, these last couple of Sundays before we begin a new liturgical year, which happens in, is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Is it 3? My calendar's off. In about 3 weeks, we begin a new liturgical year with the first Sunday of Advent, and these last Sundays of the year always have these kind of dreadful, ominous sorts of readings to try to wake us up and to think about what it means to be ready for the coming of Jesus. And so we have one of those today, don't we? We have this story. Whether it's a parable or not, I think, is up to debate. But the story that Jesus tells about these bridesmaids, some wise and some foolish, and off to a wedding. It's a strange wedding, isn't it? Have you looked at this story? So here are these bridesmaids, and they have lamps, and they're waiting for the bride to come. He shows up at midnight, for some strange reason, at this house, and some of the bridesmaids are ready, and some are not. And so we have this story in our lectionary, in our scheduled readings, to help us consider what readiness looks like for those of us on the way of love, and what it is that we're ready for. So part of that has always been in the Christian tradition some sense of this future return of the Lord and this fulfillment of what Jesus inaugurated in his life, death, and resurrection 2,000 years ago, right? So there's that coming sometime in the future, but probably more importantly, there's this sense that Jesus comes to us and dwells with us and among us right here and now. And so we're called also to ask the question, what does it mean simply to be ready to receive Jesus fully in our life in this moment here? It's important to think about these things because we often just go about our life assuming everything's fine, wanting everything to be peaceful and easy and all of that. And we don't always pay attention to what it actually means to follow Jesus day to day, what it means to be ready for what's going to go on. So I want to talk about three things very quickly that are parts of this idea of readiness for us. The first one is awareness. It's so easy for us, isn't it, to sort of bury our head in the sand and not pay attention to what's going on around us because it's easier because ignorance is bliss. Let's put it that way. Ignorance really is bliss, isn't it? I mean, if I just ignore it, it may not be real. There may not be bombs being dropped on people in Palestine. There may not be terrorist threats right outside my door of my home at the cathedral in Paris. There may not be all those things if I just bury my head in the sand and ignore it. But we have to be aware. We're called to be aware of what's going on around us. We have to know and pay attention because God is at work. And it's too easy to miss it if we just think we don't want to deal with the messiness of it. So what might it look like for you and me today to just practice a little bit more awareness of how God is working in the world and where God might need us to be those hands and feet to extend that love? The second piece of being ready is openness. And what I mean by that is that we just don't like change. Do any of us really like change that much? Can things please just stay the way they are? Because even if it's not great, at least I know how it's going to work. But our journey as followers of Jesus is one really more of change than it is of stability. We're always on the move. We're always going somewhere. And this idea of openness is simply the practice of being ready to receive whatever comes in our life. God is at work, and we need to have this willingness, this readiness to see what that is and to respond to it. And so the third one then is, I just said it, willingness. We have to hold on to whatever it is that we're holding on to lightly. God asks us, someone said this many years ago in the Diocese of Colorado, God doesn't ask us to be in this life at all cost necessarily, but definitely at all risk. Does that make sense? You and I may not be asked to give up everything to follow Jesus, but we're asked to be ready to. We're asked to risk everything to be faithful to the call to follow Jesus, to be a means by which that love and light of God in Christ is just a little bit more visible in the world. And so again, today I would ask, are we willing? Are we really willing to risk everything if asked. It's a great thing about these readings, these last Sundays of the liturgical year. They kind of push the envelope a little bit. They're not necessarily comfortable. And we don't necessarily like, as Episcopalians, that eschatological end times, the world is coming to an end kind of mode of living, of understanding our Christian faith. But nonetheless, Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. This is true. And the reason we don't know when, we don't know the hour or the day, as the gospel says, is because in a very real sense, and perhaps in the most important sense, it's right here and now, every moment of every day. Jesus is coming into our midst. Jesus is coming to transform, to heal, to bring justice, and maybe even peace to a world that desperately needs it. And you and I spend so much time being unaware, closed off, holding tightly to what we already have, that we miss it all the time. And so I hope that this year, in these last weeks, when we get these sort of dreadful readings about the end times and all of that, that you and I might spend some time reflecting on how we might more deeply cultivate awareness and openness and willingness, all as part of being ready to receive the loving presence of Jesus every minute of every day. Because whether we're aware of it or not, whether we're open to it or not, whether we're willing or not, we live in a world that desperately, desperately, desperately needs you and me to do a lot more than go to church on Sunday morning. God needs us. The world needs us to live every day in a way that shares that light and love of God in Christ, that advocates for peace, that extends compassion, that welcomes everyone into that loving relationship. So there's our challenge, friends. I don't keep a green duffel bag by the door anymore. I no longer serve in the Navy. That part of readiness is gone. But we need to practice readiness, you and I. We need to cultivate those disciplines of awareness and openness and willingness. Awareness, openness, and willingness. So that we can be part of that light and love of God and Christ every minute of every day.